Hi there, this is Jeanette, and I have another birthday card to share with you today. This features stamps and dies from Fawn. I used the Elfie Selfie stamp and die sets, as well as the stitched hillside pop-up dies to create the card. And I colored everything up using Zig Real Brush Clean Color markers. So the first thing I did was I cut a piece of paper. This is the Strathmore Bristol paper. This is a new paper I've been trying with my Zig markers, and I absolutely adore it. It's a real game changer. So I am just choosing the stamps that I want. I'm positioning them on the paper using my MISTI. And once I have the ones that I want positioned on the paper, I'm just going to swing that arm down, and I will use a anti-static tool just to brush over the paper, and then I'll be stamping it with archival black ink. Now, because I'm using the MISTI, I'm able to stamp it a few times to make sure that I get a really nice crisp imprint. I don't like pressing too hard on my stamps so that these, sometimes you get that sort of blurred line. So I'd prefer just using the MISTI and stamping it a few times to get that nice crisp outline. So now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to sprinkle over top some clear embossing powder. My ink is still wet, so the embossing powder is going to stick to it. And then I am going to heat it up using my embossing heat gun. So I love watching the sort of outline get nice and dark. And the reason I do this is that you have a sort of raised edge so that when you're watercoloring, it sort of helps keep that ink where you want it. It doesn't migrate past those lines. So I'm going to be using the Zig markers. I'm listing the marker numbers that I'm using as I'm using them and in the order that I'm using them so that you can sort of follow along. So you saw that I added some of that flesh color, then I added some light gray, and now I'm adding a darker blue-gray to some of the areas. Then I'm going to take that light gray marker and I'm just going to pick up the darker marker color and just blend it outwards. You can see how it just blends really beautifully on this paper. This paper really facilitates the blending of these markers, and it doesn't pile up or like sort of get rough around the surface. So I really love this paper. I highly recommend it. If you've been having sort of so-so results with your Zig markers, don't give up. Give this paper a try. It's really amazing. I'm going to finish blending out the color using a damp paintbrush. Doing this makes the ink a little bit lighter, sort of in the center where I'm using it, and so it gives you a beautiful contrast between your shadow areas and your lighter areas. So I do have a paper towel sort of off on the side, and I will wipe the paintbrush, any excess ink that's sort of gathering on the bristles, I will wipe that off on the paper towel, and sometimes I'll clean off the paintbrush and dry it off a little bit and then go back in, and you can see how you get this really beautiful blend. So I'm just going to do the exact same coloration process now on the rest of the body. I like working in tiny sections. It gives me a little bit more control and make sure that nothing sort of dries as I'm working. So again, I am blending out that darker marker color using the light marker and leaving some areas uncolored. And those are going to be the areas that I'll blend with my paintbrush. I'm also using a new type of paintbrush. I'm going to list all these things that I'm using below this video with links to them, so if you want to check them out. And I really like this paintbrush. I think using the paper and this new paintbrush is really changing up my results with the Zig markers. I did decide to add a little bit of a cheek color to the elephant, and you saw how easy that was. I just sort of used the marker, colored it in, and then I'm just blending out with my paintbrush. And then I'm going to go work on the mouse. I used a different dark gray color with the mouse. This had less blue tones in it, In the end, I don't think you can see much of a difference in the coloration. I did sort of want the mouse to be a different gray color from the elephant, but I don't think it really showed up that much. So I'm doing the same thing, just blending away. The mouse is pretty tiny, so it didn't take very long to color him up. I'm going to work on the balloon, and I'm just using one color for the balloon, this beautiful blue color. I'm leaving more ink on one side, and then just with my dampened paintbrush, I'm just blending it towards the center, sort of offset a little bit, and leaving one little area quite light. Now I did realize when I was putting the card together that I wanted more than one balloon, so those were the colors that just sort of flashed on the screen of the other two balloons that I colored afterwards. So now I'm going to move on to the cake, and of course it has to be a chocolate cake in this household, so I did sort of a brown color for the cake, and I just added a little bit of a very light blue color for the frosting. It's really hard to actually see much of a color there, but that's the way I wanted it, and I colored in the candles. So I'm just clipping apart my dies now. I like using this sort of little wire cutter. It makes it a little bit easier. I'm just cutting out the ones that I need, and then I will use some post-it tape to hold the dies in place. So I'm really carefully positioning them over the stamped image, and then I just secure it with a little post-it tape. This way the dies don't shift around or move around when I'm die cutting them. I do have a magnetic plate underneath the cutting plates, but I like to use this extra bit of security because after you've colored all the images, the worst feeling in the world is to not cut it properly. So I'm just going to be able to cut out one balloon, and then after I pass this through my Big Shot, I'll go back and cut out the other two as well. I am going to create the sort of grassy hills. I'm using this Lawn Fawn die. It's made so that it creates like a pop-up card, but I just basically trimmed that part off and just used the stitched hills for my card. I created my card. It's an A2 size card. I just scored it there. Now I'm using these clarity brushes to add a little bit of soft color to the background of my card. I didn't want a whole lot of color, and I wanted it very muted and soft, and using these brushes really helps give you that look. You do have to work a little bit. It's sort of a slow process to build up the color, but it's really, really soft. So I'm just putting those hills there. You can see where I sort of clipped them apart, and making sure that I have the blue, the depth of color exactly where I want it. I decided I needed a little bit more on the sides there. And then I will just adhere the hills down. And then I can go ahead and start sort of building the scene, my elephant and the cake. Those are those three balloons. You can see I added a red and green balloon there. And then I just wasn't sure. Did I want the mouse that side of the elephant or right beside the cake? And then I decided that the mouse had to be right beside the cake. So once I knew exactly where everything was going to be, I just used some adhesive to hold everything down. For the balloons, I decided to use some of this Zig glue. It was just a little bit easier because they're a little bit smaller. So I decided to use that. And I ended up having to just move those balloons. I thought I was going to be able to slide the balloon in and have them exactly where I had first placed them, but it was going to be too hard to do that. So I just added the glue to them. I put on a block and let it dry for a little bit. That block sort of holds them down to the card so that it dries securely. Now I'm going to be adding a sentiment, actually 2 sentiments. So I'm adding this wish big to the top, and I'm adding the smaller sentiment to the bottom. And I'm going to be embossing them, but I'm going to be treating each of them differently. The first one, the wish big, I stamped with this pool color, and I'm sprinkling clear embossing powder on it. And the second one I stamped with Versamark, which is clear, and I'm adding white embossing powder to it. Then I'm just going to use my heat gun again to melt the embossing powder. And you get really nice crisp images this way, and the ink will not smear. So that sentiment was stamped in the same ink that I used to create the light blue background. The little trunk was still sort of sticking up a little bit, so I put some zig glue on it and held the block down on it for a little bit. Then I'm going to just add a few sequins. This is a sequin pack. I think it's from Lucy's Attic or Lucy's, I'm not sure exactly. It'll be linked in the products below. And just scattered a few. And what I like about this is that the sequins are different colors and different sizes, and that you have these sort of iridescent little hearts in there as well. So I just love the variety. I think it just really adds a lot of interest to the card. So I'm just using that zig glue again, and I'm using my quick stick sort of pickup tool to sort of facilitate adding all those sequins. And it works fairly quickly. And my card is all done. This is a birthday card for my son. And so we love elephants in this family, so it had to be elephants. Oh, I forgot, I did add a few sort of white highlights to the sky and on the elephant's cheeks and the mouse's cheeks and on the candles. And then my card was done. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed watching me create this birthday card for my son. A full list of the supplies and all the links can be found below this video on YouTube, or you can check out my blog. Thanks a lot for watching.